And pro-government forces move into the eastern Congolese city of Uvira after the M23 rebels announced their withdrawal. Hello and welcome to Africa Live only on CGTN this Monday. I'm Mahe Mutwa in Nairobi. Here's Uche Okoronko now with your business headlines.
Thank you, Mahe. And here is a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Benin eyes a $1 billion bond deal that includes a 7-year Sukuk debut. And the IMF clears a fresh $261 million disbursement for Ethiopia. Of course, all of that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Mahe.
All right, Uche, thank you. We begin in southern Spain, where at least 39 people have been killed in a train crash, with fears the death toll could rise. The collision happened late Sunday near the town of Adamuz in Cordoba province when a derailing high-speed train crashed into an oncoming service. Dozens were injured, with more than 70 people hospitalized, many in serious condition. The transport minister called the crash extremely strange, saying it occurred on a straight section of recently renewed track. The Madrid-Andalusia high-speed line has been suspended as investigators work to determine the cause. Ken Brown reports from Atocha station in Madrid.
Well, it's an accident that's shaken the entire country. 2 trains involved in a head-on collision near the town of Adamuz, around 10 minutes outside the city of Cordoba in the southern region of Andalusia, Spain's worst train accident in over 10 years. Dozens are confirmed dead. The last update we heard this morning was 39 people, over 150 injured, 12 people still in intensive care. Now, what we know so far, one of the trains belongs to the national carrier Renfe, another is an Italian company, Irio. Their head-on collision seems to have been caused. What we've heard so far is that the final 2 carriages of the Irio train either derailed or slightly came off the rails and collided with the Renfe train that was travelling at over 200 kilometres an hour. A head-on collision there, meaning that most of the fatalities happened in the first 2 trains of the Renfe train, including the driver. We heard from the Renfe president, Alvaro Fernandez. He said those front 2 carriages were completely destroyed. So the situation still critical. This is still a rescue operation. Emergency services searching the wreckage in some hope of finding survivors. They're waiting for the heavy machinery to get there to try and move those 2 carriages. Pedro Sanchez, the Spanish Prime Minister, is expected in Andamuz today, cancelling his trip to Davos. He talked about a night of deep pain here. In this tragedy. We also heard from Transport Minister Oscar Puente. He gave a press conference talking about how this was tremendously strange because it happened in a straight section of the track that they'd already invested in, some $700 million apparently. So, you know, this really touches on a lot of people here in Spain. Over 40 million travelled on Spain's high-speed rails last year. Right now the focus is all on the victims and trying to figure out exactly what happened. Ken Brown, CGTN, Madrid.
In Nigeria, armed bandits have abducted dozens of worshippers from 2 churches in the country's northwest. That is according to Kaduna State Police, who said officers were still trying to confirm how many people were taken. However, a senior church leader put the number of those missing at more than 160. The attack occurred on Sunday morning, and those taken belong to a forest community in the Afogo ward. Kaduna State Police said the gunmen were armed with what they called sophisticated weapons when they carried out the attack. We turn to southern Africa, where officials continue to warn of more intense rain and flooding over the coming days. It comes as the death toll across the region from this extreme weather has surpassed 200 since late October. Southern Africa's rainy season generally runs from October to April, peaking between November and March. South Africa has declared a national disaster, and Mozambique's President Daniel Chapo has cancelled his trip to this week's World Economic Forum in Davos due to the crisis. CGTN's David Mbithi with the details.
The scale of the flooding in the southern African nation of Mozambique has affected more than 200,000 people nationwide. On Friday, authorities said at least 103 people had been killed in the heavy rains that began in mid-December, causing widespread flooding in Gaza, Maputo and Sofala provinces. The situation has forced Mozambique's President Daniel Chapo to skip the World Economic Forum in Davos this week, saying his focus and priority is to save lives. South Africa also dispatched rescue teams to southern Mozambique on Sunday after a car carrying 5 members of a South African mayoral delegation was swept away by floodwaters in Chokwe, some 200 kilometers north of the capital, Maputo. South Africa, which is also reeling from catastrophic flooding, has declared a national disaster. The deluge has claimed nearly 40 lives in Limpopo and Mpumalanga provinces. Officials say Limpopo was the hardest hit, with more than 1,600 homes and 31 schools affected. The flooding also forced the partial closure of Kruger National Park, one of Africa's largest wildlife reserves, prompting the evacuation of hundreds of tourists and staff members from flooded camps to other parts of the park. Officials said it's set to reopen this week. Flooding has also hit the island nation of Madagascar off the coast of Africa, as well as Malawi and Zambia. Authorities in the region still warn that more severe weather is expected in the coming days. David Mbidi, CGTN.
Well, we earlier spoke to CGTN's Julie Shire in Cape Town for more updates on this unfolding situation.
37 people have been confirmed dead, and the most affected areas have been Limpopo and Mpumalanga being the hardest hit. Districts including Mopani, Vembe, Waterberg in Limpopo and parts of Mpumalanga has suffered severe floodings. And as we heard, this is an area that has lots of game lodges. So we not only are seeing the problem that has affected the rural areas, but also these are very poor areas and the livelihoods that have been affected to the people who work in these game lodges. Some lodges have been closed, people have been evacuated from them, and homes and roads have been completely washed away. On Thursday, this past Thursday, President Cyril Ramaphosa visited the affected areas in Limpopo, and he described scenes of widespread destruction, including homes that were completely swept away. This has also influenced the beginning of the school year here in South Africa because of the flood-hit areas. So schools were unable to open. 400 millimeters of rain have fallen in this area. And so this means that in 1 week, that's what happened. And so these communities have been completely affected. And with that being now declared a national disaster, this means that mitigation efforts can start. And this will bring more intervention, fast-tracking funding for this relief operations and for repairs. It also means that the provincial and the local authorities will work together and that national resources can bring in helicopters to rescue people and to start the recovery of what needs to happen. These are also areas of agriculture and tourism, but most importantly, there needs to be some restoring of calm to the area and also deal with, for instance, the infrastructure that has been extremely damaged. And what's expected for the next few days is that there will still be lots of rain coming. Mozambique certainly being the hardest hit in the southern Africa so far, with authorities reporting 103 deaths during an unusually severe rainy season this year. The deaths are linked to flooding, lighting, collapsing of infrastructure. But then we have another problem, which will obviously be cholera because of the water contamination.
In the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, the army and its allied militia have retaken Uvira after the reported departure of M23 rebels who had seized the city early last month. Eyewitnesses, including local authorities and a civil society group, said the Wazalendo, a pro-government fighter group, were entering Uvira on Sunday, with Congolese forces expected to follow. Uvira residents have been expressing relief at the development However, reports indicate that some M23 fighters remain in the city. On Saturday, the M23 announced they were withdrawing from the strategic city in what the militia's spokesperson called a difficult decision. He said the withdrawal was to give peace efforts a chance, adding that Uvira would be under the full responsibility of the UN and the international community. However, there has been no comment yet from the UN or the Congolese government. Early last year, the Rwanda-backed M23 took control of large swaths of the eastern DRC, including the cities of Bukavu and Goma, sparking a major escalation in its conflict with the army. Right, for more on this, we spoke earlier to our correspondent in Goma, one of the cities the M23 seized in its offensive early last year.
Saturday, the last troops of M23 was leaving Uvira because this withdrawal from Uvira started 2 weeks ago, where some soldiers left because of taking care of some communities, according to what locals in Uvira was saying. But from Saturday to yesterday morning, all M23 claimed to be left Uvira. Then some Wazalendo, who are these militia fighting alongside FRDC, regained Uvira, applauded by the communities of the city of Uvira. But some communities was forced to leave Uvira, such as Wanyamulenge community, because they are appointed to be backing the M23 as they are Tutsi. And you know, this is one of the fact of this war. Some communities are being linked to the conflict because they support, or even they can be pointed without supporting. So now Uvira is under control of Wazalendo, and we are still waiting to see what the international community will decide, if it will be MONUSCO to take the control of the city soon, or if FRDC will return back in the city. The situation is still complicated for these people because, you know, for example, people of Uvira who fled, they went in the direction of Fizi and Baraka zone, where there is no road, there is no accessibility. And as we know, fighting is now in that zone. So people fled fighting in Uvira in a zone where they are now under other fightings. And it's a very sensitive zone because they are in mountains where there is no accessibility to NGOs, to anything. So many people are facing bad situation in their displacement situation. And as we know that some people who fled the returning back of Wazalendo in Uvira fled in mountains and in Sange, which is a city 20 kilometers north of Uvira, under the control of M23. So some people are still recognizing M23 as the one who protect them, the one who brought peace for them. So they had to leave Uvira to stay in Sange, also without any humanitarian assistance.
Iran's president has warned that any attack on Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei will trigger an all-out war against Iran. Masoud Pezeshkian added that Iranians are facing economic hardship due to inhumane sanctions imposed by the United States and its allies. Iran's foreign ministry accused Washington of causing regional tensions and reiterated Tehran's firm resolve to defend its sovereignty. Iran's judiciary says law enforcement and security forces are working to distinguish what it calls misled individuals from organized operatives and terrorist elements. Officials say key organizers, including foreign-linked networks, have been identified and judicial proceedings are now underway.
The United States is responsible for the current tensions. Escalation has now become part of the nature of U.S. policy. It is not Iran that deploys its military from the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Mexico and the border of the U.S. It is not Iran that interferes in the internal affairs of the United States. It is the United States that, under various pretexts, continues to pursue its interventionist policies toward Iran and other countries in the region. Whenever the U.S. speaks of diplomacy, it in fact means imposing its will and dictating terms.
Relations between the United States and Europe continue to worsen over Greenland. In the latest development, the Financial Times is reporting that the EU is considering its options, which include more than $100 billion worth of tariffs, or even restricting U.S. companies from the bloc's market. That's if U.S. President Donald Trump's duties over Greenland go ahead. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni called Washington's move a mistake. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says the issue will be discussed at an EU summit in Brussels on Thursday, while the French finance minister says Europe has instruments at its disposal to respond to the U.S. tariffs.
An increase in tariffs for countries that have chosen to contribute to Greenland's security, in my view, is a mistake, and I do not agree with it. The intention of some European countries to send troops to take part in greater security should have been understood not as an initiative directed against the United States, but rather against other actors.
There is broad consensus among Europeans that further threats of tariffs will weaken rather than strengthen transatlantic relations. They also carry the risk of escalation. Tariffs are usually paid by those in whose country the imports go. In this case, American consumers will pay the tariffs. But they would of course also damage our economy, the European economy, and the German economy in particular, which is why we want to find a solution here.
Europe has to step up. Europe has to be strong, and Europe has to make sure that the threats that have been imposed don't become reality. And for this, we need to be able to show that we're willing to use all the instruments we have at our disposal, whether they are tariffs, whether they are the trade agreements, whether they are anti-coercion measures.
We see this as unnecessary and irresponsible. It's unnecessary because we are part of the same alliance, we make the same threat analysis, we are willing to work together. And it's irresponsible because it's going to hurt the world economy and it's not in the benefit of both continents. So most important is that we de-escalate and we need to use the time ahead of us to once again try to get these tariffs off the table.
The U.S. military has ordered 1,500 active duty troops to prepare for a possible deployment to the state of Minnesota. Tensions continue to flare between protesters and law enforcement officers following the fatal shooting of a woman by an immigration agent earlier this month. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey criticized the order, saying any military deployment would worsen the situation. The Trump administration has already sent 3,000 immigration and U.S. Border Patrol officers to quell largely peaceful protests. Hendrik Sibrandi reports now from Minneapolis.
Well, it's the 12th straight day of protests here in the Minneapolis area. You may be able to see behind me, that's the Whipple Federal Building. That's where a lot of the immigration enforcement operations are being coordinated. For the past 12 days, these protesters have lined the street here to make their displeasure known about the presence of ICE in this city. Every time an ICE vehicle comes out of the parking lot here, these people yell at them, yell epithets, and again express their anger. It has not been a happy time here in the Minneapolis area since the killing of Renee Good back on January 7th. While all of this is going on, you see some law enforcement vehicles here parked along the road. Their job basically is to keep people out of the street. And they've been able to do that for the most part. These local enforcement officials are taking kind of a hands-off approach, at least for the time being. We have seen no incidents of violence or unrest here since we've been here so far. But the U.S. military is planning for the potential of deploying to the Minneapolis area. President Trump has suggested that he may invoke the Insurrection Act, that 1807 law that allows him to deploy the military to areas where there is violence and where state and local authorities are unable to maintain control. Right now, we understand 2 infantry battalions with the Army's Airborne Division. The 11th Airborne Division in Alaska are currently training. They are well-versed in cold weather operations, and this is described as prudent planning. Again, the military has not been deployed yet, but they are there training and could be sent to Minneapolis if President Trump decides they are needed. In the meantime, in addition to these protests, we also have seen pro-ICE protests in the Minneapolis area. In fact, on Saturday, there was a clash between pro-ICE protesters and anti-ICE protesters. Jake Lang, a right-wing social influencer, was spearheading the pro-ICE efforts. They managed to chase him out of the area by the much larger anti-ICE crowds who use water balloons and snowballs to get him to leave the area. So tensions obviously continue to be very high. We expect to see this for the foreseeable future. 3,000 ICE agents are in Minneapolis right now, and I would expect that these protesters will be here as long as they are. The anger on the streets is only growing here in Minneapolis, and obviously people on both sides presumably are hoping that the situation doesn't escalate from here. Hendrik Sabrandi, CGTN, Minneapolis.
Welcome back. Let's turn to Sudan now, where the UN Human Rights Chief says a chronicle of cruelty is unfolding in the war-torn country. Volker Turk has just wrapped up a 5-day mission to Sudan, where he visited Port Sudan, Dangola, and the localities of Ad Daba and Merowe in northern state. These are places where many of Sudan's displaced have been seeking refuge during the ongoing civil war. Turk appealed to the international community and regional actors to help bring the conflict to an end. CGTN's Robert Nagila tells us more.
Addressing the media in Kenya's capital Nairobi on Sunday after a visit to Sudan, Volker Turk says he bore witness to the brutality Sudanese civilians have suffered for close to 3 years.
One woman saw her husband and only son killed. I met her still bedridden from grief and still carrying the bullet that she took in her shoulder while trying in vain to shield her son.
Turk also raised the alarm over a developing humanitarian catastrophe in the Kordofan region, where the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF, and its allies are trying to capture the city of Kadugli from the Sudanese Armed Forces, the SAF.
There are advances towards SAF-controlled Kadugli by the RSF and SPLM North, and we are seeing continued massive displacement of civilians from the besieged city. All this in the context of extreme food insecurity, with famine conditions confirmed in Kadugli and risk of famine in other areas, including in Dilling.
The human rights chief warns if the city falls, there could be a repeat of the atrocities committed against civilians during the siege and eventual capture of the Darfur city of El Fasher by the RSF.
The warning signs of what was to happen were already clear before El Fasher was captured. So I bring you back to El Fasher because our warning signs were very clear. We issued these warnings multiple times, including in September last year. But yet, these warnings were not heeded and heinous atrocities were committed. I issue here today the same stark warning for Kadugli.
Turk says sexual violence has been weaponized in the conflict, accusing both sides of grave human rights violations. He says his office is documenting the horrific violations and abuses to hold those responsible accountable. Fighting between the RSF and SAF has been raging since April 2023. Tens of thousands have been killed, with close to 12 million people displaced by the fighting. Bobat Nagela, CGTN.
Now, Sudan's capital, Khartoum, was retaken from the RSF early last year. The army quickly brought some level of stability to the city, and the government is now returning there from Port Sudan. However, despite major reconstruction efforts, many essential public services remain offline. That's including power and water. CGTN's Caroline B. has more.
The battle for Khartoum and the subsequent RSF occupation of the capital left a trail of destruction. Damaged and destroyed civilian infrastructure, including power stations, left many, especially in Khartoum's Tuti Island, in darkness. The army has since retaken Khartoum, but many problems remain.
Electricity is a lifeline, and we have suffered greatly due to the power outages. It has negatively impacted all aspects of our life: school, health, and even the economy. Shops and refrigerators stopped working. Communication and water services were disrupted, and even water supply was cut off.
Residents say with power blackouts, fuel prices have soared, increasing the cost of living. Power outages have also halted water purification and distribution networks, worsening the suffering for many.
The power cuts affected us greatly. Diseases, mosquitoes and flies increased. The situation was extremely difficult, but we adopted and accepted the reality. The people of Sudan and those of Tuti are exhausted. When gas was available, the price of a single cylinder skyrocketed to around $240, making it unaffordable for most people. We are now cooking with firewood.
Authorities and officials have acknowledged extensive damage to the country's electricity sector, and they say rebuilding will be a costly affair.
At the transmission network level, we lost over 1,000 kilometers of transmission lines, and this has significantly impacted the delivery of electricity to the rest of the states. Our infrastructure has suffered extensive damage, both at the substations and distribution stations. We lost a large number of transformers due to oil and copper theft. Our losses have been enormous.
But since the army recaptured Khartoum from the Rapid Support Forces last March, the government says it's striving to restore services. Last week, authorities announced a return of administrative duties from Port Sudan to Khartoum. And with that move, they promised improved electricity, water and sanitation services, including the reconstruction of hospitals and schools. And with such promises, residents are hoping that Khartoum will become what it once was. Caroline B., CGTN.
In Libya, at least 200 migrants have been freed from a secret prison in the southeastern town of Kufra. This follows an operation by Libyan security operatives who raided detention cells nearly 3 meters deep. Security sources say the migrants are mainly women and children from Somalia and Eritrea. They had been held captive in the underground prison controlled by a Libyan human trafficker for 2 years. Libya is a notorious transit route for migrants fleeing conflict and poverty, aiming for Europe. As they journey through the North African country, many are targeted and exploited by criminal gangs. It comes a week after about 21 bodies were found in a mass grave in eastern Libya, where 10 survivors bore signs of torture. Well, it's just about time for the business here on Africa Live. Let's go to Rama with your business headlines.
Thank you, Mahi. And here is a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Benin eyes a $1 billion bond deal that includes a 7-year Sukuk debut. And the IMF clears a fresh $261 million disbursement for Ethiopia.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa. So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Well, let's start off in Benin. The West African economy is now preparing to raise up to $1 billion from the sale of a dollar-denominated sukuk bond. Now, Benin plans to issue a $500 million 7-year sukuk. It will also seek an equivalent amount by tapping its existing dollar bonds, which will mature in 2038 and 2041. Now, if successful, it will be the first African sovereign debt offering this year. According to reports, the transaction could be priced as early as tomorrow, with the final amount decided by investor demand. Of course, Benin has hired banks, including Citigroup and JP Morgan, to market that offering. The country's $750 million of debt, which is due in 2038, traded little changed on Friday at a yield of 7.52%. Well, let's head to Nigeria now. The country's national budget is usually based around crude oil, specifically crude oil production and pricing. Well, for this year, the government is projecting prices of around $64 per barrel and production of 1.84 million barrels per day. Now, while there is no certainty that it can meet those production targets, what's more worrisome right now for the government is global oil prices. And analysts say that prices could be impacted by a supply glut, especially as the U.S. eases restrictions on the sale of Venezuelan oil. Here's CGTN's Deji Badamosi with more on that.
When global oil prices fall, Nigeria catches cold as its budget takes a direct hit. Despite the geopolitical tensions in Venezuela, Iran and the Black Sea, which have sent prices up, there are still concerns of a looming supply glut when the tensions die down and Venezuelan oil especially hits the market. Already demand is weak and the market is contending with an ongoing supply surplus of 2.3 million barrels per day. Goldman Sachs is already forecasting Brent and WTI could average $56 and $52 per barrel, way below Nigeria's budget benchmark of $60.
So the fact that we are seeing slowdown in economic activity in major consumer nations will mean that demand for input material will continue to moderate. And that's why, as long as even OPEC members continue, and OPEC and other members continue to even supply their current level of production, we are going to have possibly an imbalance between demand and supply because ordinary demand has slowed down. Not because of Venezuela. I think the level of investment are required to bring Venezuela oil back into the market at a higher volume will not be something that we accomplish in the next 1 year. So I don't think the challenge we're going to have with oil prices will come from Venezuela. It come from the U.S. trade policies that have constrained demand exports by most countries and slow down economic productive activities in almost all the major economies of the world.
Nigeria's challenge is not just price, but also volume. The country barely meets its OPEC production quota, and producing above 1.5 million barrels per day on a consistent and sustained basis has always been a tough struggle. And in the likely event of fresh OPEC production cuts, the country's budget will suffer further. The government, though, says it is ramping up production after curtailing oil theft in the country's oil-bearing region. It says it hopes to hit 2 million barrels per day by 2027.
When we say increasing production, it sounds simple, but there's a lot that goes into it. It means attracting the right investment to increase production, whether it's oil or gas. We're hoping to, achieve at least 1.8 million barrels, per day in terms of oil production, as well as further increase in terms of gas production as well.
But not many are optimistic about the government projection on production.
Increasing our crude oil production by over 200 to 300,000 barrels in a single year average will be a tall call. So we may also struggle to achieve the budget for crude, which also takes you to another issue of negative volume variance. If you add these two variants, negative variances, you're going to have a major decline in, or a major shortfall in government revenue, which we similar to what we saw last year. So if that repeats this year, the government will struggle to meet its budgetary obligations, and that will constrain economic growth.
Despite oil accounting for under 5% of Nigeria's GDP, it still accounts for over 80% of the country's foreign exchange earnings. Any drop in oil revenue will directly impact the local currency and drive up foreign exchange, which has dire consequences in a country that is heavily import dependent.
So we need to diversify and begin to produce some additional goods that have value addition. We've seen some marginal improvement in export of agricultural produce, but we need to get to the point of beneficiation where we export finished goods. And that's the way out of the current quagmire where Nigeria relies almost 80% to 90% on oil exports.
Nigeria's oil problem is no longer just about barrels of oil in the ground, but about a global market it does not control. As the 2026 budget takes shape, analysts say the real test for policymakers will be whether the cycle of vulnerability finally forces deeper economic reform or simply another round of fiscal adjustments. Deji Badimosi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, let's head to another oil-producing nation. In Libya, the country has partnered with international firms as it looks to expand and develop its critical maritime gateway, the Msurata Free Zone. Now, according to Libya's Prime Minister, the project is expected to draw nearly $2.7 billion in investment. Abdul Hamid Debebe says the expanded zone could generate operating revenues of around $500 million annually. Now, the Misurata Free Zone signed the deal with Terminal Investment Limited, which is expected to help turn the port into a competitive logistics hub linking Africa, Europe and the Middle East. Doha-based Maha Capital Partners also joined the partnership, providing long-term capital and strategic oversight. Now, in Ethiopia, the International Monetary Fund has approved a fresh disbursement of about $261 million to Africa's second most populous nation. And this comes after the IMF completed its fourth review of the country's program under the Extended Credit Facility. Now, the funds will support Ethiopia's homegrown economic reform program, which aims to correct macroeconomic imbalances and also lay the groundwork for growth led by the private sector. According to the IMF, Ethiopia's overall program performance has been strong. It also said nearly all key targets largely met commitments, even as social safety net spending fell somewhat short of its goals. According to the IMF, Ethiopia recorded economic growth estimated at 9.2% in the fiscal year 2024-25. And now to international news. China's GDP grew 5% last year, exceeding 140 trillion yuan, and of course meeting the annual growth target. Now, the State Council Information Office made that announcement as it also outlined China's 2025 economic performance and its outlook for the year ahead. CGTN's Wang Mingjie reports from Beijing.
Despite external shocks and domestic challenges, China's gross domestic product, or GDP, surpassed 140 trillion yuan, or about $20 trillion in 2025, marking a 5% increase year-on-year. So what are the facts behind these figures? Kang Yi, head of China's National Bureau of Statistics, explained why the data pointed to the resilience of Chinese economy.
China's GDP exceeded 140 trillion yuan for the first time in 2025, while foreign exchange reserves topped $3.3 trillion. For a super-large economy like China, achieving such stable development is by no means easy.
Facing mounting uncertainties, Kang said China remains committed to a path of high-quality development, accelerating the shift from old to new growth drivers, while deepening reform and opening up. New growth drivers have continued to strengthen. The World Intellectual Property Organization ranked China 10th among the world's most innovative economies, up one place from the previous year. Amid intertwined risks and challenges, Kang said China's economy has achieved both a leap in quantity and improvement in quality.
This fully demonstrates the Chinese economy's ability to adapt and break through unstable and uncertain environments, as well as its resilience in withstanding pressure and stress.
China's growth rate now ranks among the highest of major economies, making it one of the most stable and reliable drivers of global economic growth. Its contribution to global growth is expected to reach around 30%. Despite the challenges ahead, Kang said China remains confident in its ability to sustain high-quality economic growth, bringing new opportunities and positive momentum to the global economy as it works toward a strong start to the next 5-year plan period. Wang Mengjie, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, still in the country, let's now turn to the surge in visa-free inbound tourism to Hainan. The Southern Island province offers China's most favorable visa-free policies, allowing travelers from 86 countries to enter without a visa. Now, coupled with improved entry facilitation, visa-free arrivals have risen sharply in that region. Since Hainan Free Trade Port, or rather the Hainan Free Trade Port launched special customs operations on December 18th, some 87,000 foreign visitors have entered the province. That's a 64% year-on-year increase, and it accounts for 93% of all foreign arrivals during the same period. Most visitors came for tourism, mainly from Russia, Malaysia, Indonesia, South Korea, Kazakhstan, and Singapore.
The visa-free policy makes travel much more convenient. Hainan is already quite well known. We plan to visit Ocean Flower Island in Danzhou, then Haikou and Sanya. This is my first time here, and I brought a group of 20 Malaysian tourists.
I think it's quite smooth and efficient. Yeah. So I'm going to Hainan for the family trip because, my husband's family is original from Hainan, so we want to spend some time to meet family members, and I heard the scenery very beautiful. I heard there's also some big shopping mall, so we also want to do some shopping here as well. So very exciting to explore Hainan. Yeah.
We're looking forward to just having chat, taking the train, and then going around. It's new to us. Yeah, it's new to us. And of course, Sutongpo is very interesting for me. I study Chinese literature. Yeah, so from young, I've been studying Chinese history and Chinese poetry and literature. Yeah.
Well, that is all for now on Africa Live Biz, but still ahead on Global Business Africa. South Africa's Reserve Bank plans to introduce a new cash smart strategy in an effort to revamp the country's cash system and improve access, particularly for rural communities in the country. We'll bring you more on that at the top of the hour. For now, it is back to you, Mahayan.
All right, Uche, we will see you again at the top of the hour with Global Biz. That's evidently Uche and not Rama who will be joining you for that program. For now, here's what's coming up in sport. We'll have all the reaction to last night's chaotic AFCON final as Senegal emerged kings of Africa.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Well, let's begin with last night's Africa Cup of Nations final as Senegal came through after extra time to defeat the host nation, Morocco. But that only tells half the story in what was an epic night in Rabat. CGTN's Sadiq Shaban brings us the whole story from the Moroccan capital.
It was a much-anticipated matchup of this year's tournament. Two of Africa's top teams going head-to-head in the grand finale of this year's Africa Cup of Nations. 66,000 fans thronged the Moulay Abdallah Stadium here in Rabat to watch the action, while million others followed the match live on television for a match that would make headlines for all the wrong reasons. Each side had clear and decent chances in the first half, but neither could find the back of the net as they went in for the break at 0-0. However, drama unfolded in the second half when Morocco awarded a controversial penalty at the end of the final seconds of the 8 minutes added on after the 90. Senegal fans protested and rioted inside the stadium, having seen their side denied a goal minutes earlier after a VAR review, and their players temporarily walked out of the pitch. Morocco's Brahim Diaz missed the resultant penalty kick after 24 minutes delay, calming down the agitated Senegalese supporters as home fans sank. The winning goal was scored just 4 minutes into extra time by Senegal's Pape Gaye, who gave Yassine Bono in the Moroccan goal no chance with a shot from the range.
Honestly, I think it would have been really sad and unfortunate to see a final end like that. Personally, I think it's impossible to convey such an image to the whole world. You know, African football is followed now more than ever. African football has developed in an incredible way. So for me, it was about honor. I'd rather lose than end a match like that. And I think that's what pushed me to tell the lads to come back out onto the pitch and play our football. God is great. All that he does is great.
On était à une minute, même pas d'être champion d'Afrique.
We were last a minute away from becoming African champions. Football is often cruel. Today, we can see that we lost this match and visit our chance to be African champions. Then, we also lost Igamane during the game, so we end up with 10 men. From the moment we missed the penalty, everything turned against us. In the end, we missed the opportunity of lifetime for some of us. And for me, we have to come back stronger. We cannot give up. We have shown good image of Moroccan football.
After the match, Morocco fans were less than impressed with how the final descended into a farce as Senegal supporters celebrated their stunning victory.
He ruined it at the minute 98, but all the match was good. The referee was good all the match, but the minute 98 wasn't good.
I'm disappointed and yeah, congratulations Senegal. You are the champion. You deserve the win.
I think it is easy to reach the final at home. He have to win the cup, and he said that he will quit if he don't win the cup. He said already the past African Nationship, and I hope he will leave and will make place for another coach, that we go to the World Cup and to see what it is possible there. I am champion, I am second étoile, and I'm very happy. I'm from two French. I go to Morocco for this time.
Only for one day.
Only for one day, just for see the match of football, and I'm very happy.
Despite the chaotic ending to an otherwise well-organized Africa Cup of Nations, Senegal would not be denied their second title in 5 years, while Morocco's long wait to lift the AFCON trophy has been extended for another agonizing 2 years. Sadiq Shaban, CGTN, in Rabat, Morocco.
Well, unsurprisingly, there were wild scenes of celebration in Senegal's capital, Dakar. Fans emerged from their homes and other viewing areas to take over the city streets in song and dance. Many said the win was all the sweeter following what they believed to be hugely contentious officiating against their team. It's Senegal's second AFCON title ever, the first coming in 2021.
We really needed to win. This team showed me courage and seriousness. We gave everything we had. We really thank Sadio Mane. He gave us everything.
There was too much cheating, but when Sadio Mane did not accept that our players leave the competition, that really helped Senegal. We would have had problems if we had left, but really Sadio Mane did everything for us to stay. We endured and God rewarded us. We are very happy.
Meanwhile, the Confederation of African Football is coming in for more criticism over its decision to overhaul Africa's football cycle. From 2028, AFCON will be played every 4 years. That's instead of the traditional 2, with other elements of African football being strengthened. However, some members are saying the top brass made the decision without a full and thorough consultation. A CAF spokesman said the decision to overhaul the cycle was ultimately a commercial decision.
My heart says 2 years, but my head knows that 2 years is not sustainable. So my head tells me 4 years is the only sustainable model for African football. African football has to evolve to be commercially strong, to be commercially amongst the best in the world. We have to take a lot of practical steps. How do we attract sponsors? How can we give sponsors longer period to leverage on this? We cannot live on credit card forever. We've got to find ways and means to reposition our brand, to reposition our product, to ensure that commercially it's strong, commercially it's sustainable, commercially it's attractive. That is what you need to do.
Well, let's turn to Spain's La Liga, where Barcelona suffered a surprise loss to Real Sociedad last night, as their lead over Real Madrid at the top was cut to just 1 point over the weekend. Mikel Oyarzabal put the home side in front just after the half-hour mark. Marcus Rashford drew the Catalan club level with 20 minutes to go, but Sociedad were back in the lead just seconds later through Goncalo Guedes. A red card from Sociedad came too late to seriously impact the game, and the Basque club claimed all 3 points. It resulted in ending Barca's 11-match winning streak in all competitions. Head coach Hansi Flick was left a frustrated figure after the game, and he supported Frankie de Jong's criticism of the officials.
Well, I'm disappointed. I think we made a fantastic game. We created a lot of opportunities, but at the end, I think the result reflects not our game. I'm not a player. I'm not in the pitch. But at the end, I just heard what he said, and he's right. He's right. But I don't want to waste energy, for this guy. I think everyone in the television and also in the stadium saw his performance, and yeah, we have to accept it. It's like that.
Well, let's now get the latest from the Australian Open, which opened in Melbourne over the weekend. Novak Djokovic said he felt great as the 10-time champion delivered a serving masterclass against Spain's Pedro Martinez to move into round 2. The 38-year-old dropped only 5 points with the ball in his hand in a comprehensive 6-3, 6-2, 6-2 win. This included no less than 8 holes to love and 14 aces. It was perhaps fitting that the 24-time Grand Slam legend would close with an ace. The number 4 seed says he's now looking forward to what the next few days might bring.
Let's see how he's going to feel in a few days' time. Performance-wise, the feeling on the court was great, so I couldn't ask for more. Obviously, great serving performance. Just overall felt really good on the court. That has, made me feel good on it for so many times throughout my career. So let's see what comes my way in a few days' time.
In the women's action, Iga Swiatek got off to a rocky start but eventually pulled through against the Chinese qualifier Yuan Yue on Monday. Like Carlos Alcaraz in the men's, the number 2 seed is looking to complete the Grand Slam in Melbourne this month following her win at Wimbledon last July. The 24-year-old wasn't at her best in the Rod Laver Arena on Monday. She took the first set in a tight tiebreaker but recovered well to take the second set 6-2. The poll says she's happy to get through a sticky first-round match.
I guess, there were some moments where I felt great, but like the start of the match wasn't that perfect. So I'm happy that I worked through this and could, finish in 2 sets, as you said, and also during tiebreak, play more, aggressively and more precise, I guess.
And finally to basketball, where Kevin Durant passed his idol Dirk Nowitzki on the NBA's career scoring list on Sunday. Playing for the Houston Rockets, Durant needed just 17 points against the New Orleans Pelicans to move past the German into 6th place. The two-time NBA champion got 18 as he helped the Rockets to a 9-point win over the bottom side in the West. The 37-year-old has now amassed 31,562 points, just 730 behind arguably the greatest player of all time, that's Michael Jordan. Durant says he'll do his best to chase him down.
To be up there, with Dirk, like I said earlier, somebody I look up to, I idolized, competed against. We had some great battles. He always was supportive of my career and my game. So, to be up there with a legend like that is just insane. And be right underneath Michael Jordan, it's crazy, man. I always dreamt about being in the league and being a superstar level player and all of this, but you never know exactly how your career is going to go. So I'm happy it's going this way. I want to continue to keep stacking, keep climbing up the charts, just to see how I finish. It's going to be, it's been amazing thus far.
That's where we leave it on this edition of Africa Live. Do remember, if you'd like to get in touch with the program, you can by sending your feedback to those contacts on your screen and following us as well on all those digital media platforms. I'm Mahemutwa. Thanks for watching. Global Business is up next.